Good morning, students. Hope you're all doing well. So, in today's session, I'll just be giving you a brief introduction to the syllabus. That is, for the subject managing human resources. Right? See, as we all know that in the previous videos, I have given you clarity regarding the scope of the subject. What is that you need to know to be prepared to understand the concepts that is being there in the subject and all of that, right? So now we will straight away start with the syllabus. Firstly, I'll give you detailed description of what is the syllabus all about, and then we will go ahead with the modules. Fine. So let us start with the first one. The first is module 1. So here module 1 is to do with introduction to human resource management. So under this, what are the various things that we'll be covering? Number one, we will be discussing about the definition, objectives, functions, and scope of human resource management. As we all know, in today's world, you need to understand the ways, the tactics, and the tricks involved in handling people or managing human resources. Because human resources occupy a very prime position in any company. We need to know that these people, who are also called as human capital, play a very important role as they facilitate major changes to take place in the companies. Okay, see, a company can have a very good infrastructure, it can have very good technology and application software packages in it, or it can even have a very good strategies, but ultimately if you do not have people who will use these things to take leverage of the company, then that is not going to serve any purpose. So the first thing that we need to understand is who are human resources, what is the role played by these people, how do we manage these people, and managing includes definition of HRM, objectives, functions, and scope, right? And the next is we will also be discussing about certain important models of HRM. Now, these models have been contributed by a lot of people, a lot of theorists and practitioners in the field of HRM, and we are going to see what is it that they have contributed in the field of HRM, right? By going through their models. Then, thirdly, HRM in India and global context. It is nothing but to understand what has been the effect, the reach of HR management practices both in India as well as in the global context. Now, let me tell you one thing, the concept remains the same, but the applications to some extent can have variation according to the requirements of the market and the countries where these companies have been established, right? And the very important thing is evolution of HRM. How did this concept of HRM come into existence? What triggered the existence of HRM? What was the necessity? And what is the stage, at which stage is HRM now? What is happening now in the HR space and domain? All of these things will be discussed there. Then HR metrics, as I already told you in the previous sessions or say in the videos, HR metrics is nothing but it is a tool which is being used to convert qualitative data into quantitative data. Metrics means use of numbers and formulas. Okay, so with the help of these things, you'll be able to quantify and give actual facts, very precise estimates regarding how much is required, what is required, what is the skill set available, what is the vacancy positions. All of these things will be given to you in terms of numbers, because many times what you see as a concept can be justified qualitatively, but sometimes to do it quantitatively becomes a challenge. Hence we use HR metrics, right? And then the next is qualities of a good HR manager. So this can be a potential question for your exam as well. And then HR dashboards, human resource outsourcing, HR audit, human resource information system. You remember, right? In the introductory session, I've informed you, I've given you the information regarding HRIS, just a brief note, right? So that we will be doing in detail, fine? And then we also go to the last topic, that is human resource planning, which is also called as workforce planning or talent planning. Now here, under this, we'll be discussing about HR planning as a source of information. So how is this concept of HRP used by companies as a source of information? So if it's a source of information, what is that information which is being collected for this purpose? Okay, all of that will be discussed. And then methods of human resource planning, which basically includes job analysis, job description, job specification, and job redesign. All of these things will be detailedly explained to you in the future coming classes. Then we move on to the next module, that is module 2, recruitment, selection, and retention. So here we know that all three activities are very, very critical and significant for a company's sustainability and survivability in the market. We know that the companies today have a very complex environment where they're supposed to work. Number one. Number two, we also know that there is something called as competencies which are being cropped up, which means every company is finding a way in which it can create a niche for itself and use that niche element as a source of competitive advantage against other competitors or other companies, right? So in this, keeping this in the background or keeping this in your mind as a focal point, we need to know that recruitment, selection, retention becomes very, very important for companies. Every single employee who is in the company matters the most, because every single employee is giving you something in return for what you're giving him in the form of pay and salary or any other benefits in kind as well, right? So let us see what are the things that we'll be discussing in module 2. Purpose and importance of recruitment, very important. What are the various forms and sources of recruitment, very important again. The selection activity, selection process, and the steps involved in the selection process, the techniques of selection, what are the common pitfalls or errors or mistakes people commit when they select candidates, right? Then that is called as selection errors. Then orientation induction, we know this, we've already described about this in the previous sessions also, I mean to say the previous semester subjects also. And then onboarding and placement. So what is going to be onboarding, how do we do it, and placement, what is the systematic steps involved in placing an employee in the right job, making sure that the description of the job is matching with that of the requirement, and according to that it is also matching with the skill set possessed by the employees, and so on. So, and then retention, and then managing attrition, and finally retention strategies which are being used by companies even to this day. So these are all the things that we'll be discussing about in module 2. Next, module 3, we will be discussing about training and development and career management. Very important for you. So here, the first section is going to do with training and development. So what are we going to do here? As we all know that, see, if you remember, I would have told it to you in class as well. In a company, we basically split up the employees into 3 categories based on their relative levels of skills, right? So coming from the lowermost level to the uppermost level, the top, we call it as bottom up approach. We say lowermost is unskilled, then the next higher level is semi-skilled, and the next higher level is skilled or fully skilled, right? So according to the place where the employee exists in this particular scale of unskilled, skilled, semi-skilled, and skilled, we identify their needs and requirements in terms of training and developing them, and accordingly we need to give them, impart them the skills that they require, right? So technically speaking, people who come under unskilled and semi-skilled, for them you need to give them training. But when you're talking about, when we are speaking about the first that first layer, the topmost layer, that is your people are fully skilled, for them we do not give them training. Instead, we come up with certain developmental activities and campaigns which helps to polish them their skills and make sure that these people become more they have the potential to occupy even more higher grades and positions and seats, right? So let us see what comes under training and development here. First is we'll be discussing about training need analysis, and then designing a training program. So what are the steps involved in it? Evaluating a training program. Again, what are the what are the steps involved in it? How to do it very technically, keeping in mind the resource constraints of a company, and then approaches to training. So what are the various approaches, the possible approaches that people take to or the corporates take to in training people, and then methods of training. So here we see some of the methods of training. So technically speaking, we have on the job methods of training and off the job methods of training. Okay, that is going to be the broad classification. Okay, so in your syllabus they have specifically mentioned about these types of training, like job instructor training or job instruction training, coaching, mentoring, job rotation, and apprenticeship training. Okay, and then we will also be discussing about certain very important learning theories. Right, we have discussed quite a number of learning theories in the previous semester, that is semester 1, under the subject management and organizational behavior, right? For example, if you see here, the second theory, social learning theory, we have already discussed, which was given by Bandura, if I'm not wrong, right? See, let us see. So here we'll be discussing about three theories: Jane Piaget's theory, social learning theory, Cobb's model on learning style of individuals. These are the three important theories that we will be discussing in the class. And continuation of module 3, the next topic, career management. So here we will be discussing about, firstly, what is career management? What is career? How do we define career? Now, how companies help employees in managing and scaling up their career options? What are the various alternative options available or made available to the employees or the workforce in the company, right? So all of these things will be discussed. Now under that specifically, we will be discussing need for career planning. What is the need? What is the requirement? Career development, the concept, steps involved in career development or the process, elements in career development, again important, career anchors in career development, again a very important topic, you must be knowing this, diversity in career development, and then finally we discuss about counseling and mentoring in career development. Now that is the very important place where companies will have to invest a lot of money into and make sure adequate counseling and mentoring is given to the employees in order to firstly identify what is their area of expertise, secondly find provide them a path which these employees can take forward and accordingly channelize through their skills, and then make sure they convert these things into very good business opportunities for themselves. So everything that happens in companies is like a process of learning, and this learning has no ends, right? It is a means to an end, it can never be an end, right? Then competency. Under competency we'll be discussing about the concept of competency, which basically covers the meaning and definition and introduction, and then meaning, and then coming to the types of competencies, very important, and what is the process of competency mapping. So here again, this is going to be very important. There is very good potential for case studies which can, for questions which come under cases, which can match to the process of competency mapping, right? And then we move on to the next module, that is module 4, which is to do with compensation and performance management. So basically we know that as human beings, or employees in a company, one of the very simplest ways of understanding compensation and performance is that we tend to exert more and greater performance and involvement in any task which is assigned to us, which is purely dependent on what we get in return for what we give out, right? So what basically happens here is we are discussing about the various ways in which we get rewarded. It can be financial incentives or non-financial incentives. These are all the various ways through which we, or say, our motivation gets even more stronger and more purposeful, right? So here under compensation and benefits, we will be discussing about certain topics. Number one is going to be basic purpose of compensation. So what is the purpose for coming up with the compensation plan? And then the differences between wages versus salaries, and then components of remuneration, very important, determinants of compensation strategy, as it helps us to understand how a strategy is being made and what are the various factors that has to be considered, which determines how much compensation has to be paid to which employee based on the relative levels of skills, right? And then job evaluation methods, very important for your exam. And then pay for knowledge and skill based pay, which means sometimes it is not that you decide what amount of money should be paid to the employees based on the units produced. We are talking about physical measures, right? Sometimes there are people who try to contribute in terms of giving you fresh and valuable information, which will act as a source of knowledge for the company. And based on the knowledge that the company has acquired through these talent resources or human resources, they will be able to make very good decisions. We call it as strategic decisions or domain decisions, right? So here skill based pay is again a concept where we don't pay for what he does, instead we pay for how much he contributes, keeping in mind his relevant contribution in terms of his skills, right? All of these things. Then we discuss about wage and salary administration and incentives and performance based rewards, which basically can be categorized into three types or three levels. One, at the individual level, how they give you rewards, at the team level, and group incentive plans, fine. And then we move on to the last one, that is performance management. Now, under performance management, we will be discussing about the concept of performance management firstly, and then we will also discuss about the different elements of performance management, the process and evaluation techniques involved in performance management, the issues and dilemmas people encounter when they manage performance or handle the performance management process, and then context and design model of system, very important topic which we will be discussing in the later in the future coming classes. And then very important again, human resource accounting. There are basically two terms. One is human resource accounting, and there is one more term called as human resource auditing or audit. Okay, both is important and both can have very good potentials to come for your exam. The next is module 5, that is managing employee relations. So as we all know that we are going to talk or say explain about industrial relations. Now, what do we mean by industrial relation? It is the relationship that takes place between employer and employee, between employee and employee, between employer, employee, and the organization. Now, this is how we understand the concept of industrial relations or employee relations, right? So, let us see what are the things that we'll be discussing in this module. Okay, this module is very simple and easy to understand. Okay, number one, employee relations. Under that, we will be discussing about the meaning and characteristics of employee relations, the parties to industrial relations, who are the key participants involved in industrial relations, like employees, employers, organization, top management, and government, which is also going to make some rules and regulations which affects the continuation of service and activities to be included in the service of an employee with correspondence to the organization where he or she renders a service to. And finally, theoretical perspectives on industrial relations. And the next topic is trade unions, where we will be first describing the meaning or the concept of trade union, how the trade unions came into place. Is there any act which is passed in the parliament which is used for benefiting the trade unions? And then nature of trade unions or the features, types of trade unions in our country, also to see what are the various types of trade unions in the global context, what are the reasons for joining trade unions. So this is going to be reasons for, not or. Okay, just correct it, reasons for joining trade unions. And finally, problems of trade unions, right? And then industrial disputes, causes of industrial disputes, grievance procedures, redressal of grievances through collective bargaining. So collective bargaining is a concept which is being used as a mechanism to solve grievances or resolve conflicts. Okay, then features of collective bargaining, again important, workers participation management, and the various laws relating to employee relations. All of these things will be discussed in industrial disputes. And finally, we go to module 6, that is the global environment. So what are we going to discuss in this module? Number one, we split up the module into two. Okay, firstly, the first half of the module is going to be about global issues in HRM. The second half of the module is going to be about domestic issues in HRM. So under global issues in HRM, we will be discussing about the stages of development of transnational organizations. We need to know all of these things because every single stage gives us something to learn, and from the learning we need to develop even more things to the for the betterment of the company in the long run, right? Then structural implications, international human resource management strategy, and understanding the cultural, political, and legal environment which is going to affect the success of implementation of HR practices in the companies. And then we shift our perspective from global to domestic, right? So domestic issues in HRM. Under this, we'll be discussing about local recruiting and selection practices, how it is done, what are the various portals from where you'll be able to recruit fresh talent, all of these things, training and compensation issues, or what are the various problems that you might encounter, what are the steps involved in it, and many more things. Managing international transfers and assignments, very important. Probably the concept of expatriation, repatriation, all of these things also will be coming in this module. And then expatriates and corporate international strategy, very important. And then see, let me give you a small gist of what we understand by the term called as expatriates or expatriation. Expatriation is a process whereby an employee who is working in the home country, based on his performance, if he has all the qualities in him, keeping in mind his experience, his expertise and skill set, he will be given an option or an opportunity
to be promoted or transferred from the home country company to the host country company. Okay, so he is going to move from one country to another country. This process is called as expatriation on official purposes and for the job and work assignment purposes, right? Now, the person who goes or who's involved in this process, I mean to say the employee, is termed as an expatriate. Okay, then what is repatriation? The process of that person who has gone to the host country company, of him returning back to the home country company, is what is termed as repatriation, right? Fine, then continuation. So how does this happen? What are the techniques? What is the technicalities involved? All of that will be given to you when we discuss this module in detail. Okay, so next is selecting performance management, training and compensating expatriates, then repatriation, and the future of international human resource management or human resource management, right? So these are all the various topics that we will be discussing in this sixth module. Okay, now finally, students, I have just given you a gist of what we will be discussing in the future coming classes in each of these, in each of these modules, right? Starting from module 1 to module 6. So here, what we will be doing for this semester is, with the explanation, we will be giving you some examples, and we will also be solving a case after finishing every module. Okay, so module wise we'll be discussing a case as well. We will solve it, and meanwhile you people also should start participating and involving. You should start working hard. Okay, so make sure you focus, you keenly observe and listen. Anywhere you have a confusion, you will get back to me. Fine. So students, study well and make sure you are able to get what I'm telling you. If there is any confusion, make sure you have to inform me. You can ask me your questions and I'll be giving you clarity so that you are clear from your end, right? So we'll go ahead, students. The next video, I'll be sending you a video on module 1, and make sure that you are all connected with me. Okay, thank you, students.